Brilliance Audio presents Under Almond Blossoms by Anja Saskia Beyer, translated by Annette Charpentier, performed by Cynthia Farrell. It's just a feeling, Mama. Milla's voice was shaky, and not just because of the potholes she was maneuvering around on her mint green Dutch bicycle, one hand holding the mobile to her ear while the other gripped the handlebar. As every other morning, she was cycling along this road in Berlin Friedrichshain, lined with cafes and small shops. The wind felt cool on her pale face, but it was a mild February day, and some trees were already showing their first buds. Here and there, early yellow crocuses lightened the beds around the tree trunks. "Feeling? What feeling? Are you saying you aren't sure?" Her mother's voice sounded alarmed. Even though she had lived in Berlin for years, her Spanish accent was still very strong. "No, I don't know for sure anymore, Mama." Milla felt her stomach tighten as she realized her mother wasn't really listening to her, as usual. "Well, if you don't trust him, then you can't marry him, Milla. Under no circumstances. The wedding has to be cancelled." Milla briefly closed her eyes in despair. Why on earth had she said anything? She was annoyed with herself. Normally, she wouldn't have confided in her. Her mother never talked about feelings, let alone vague feelings. But Milla had been awake all night, getting more and more upset, and when her mother had rung to tell her that she had no idea what to buy Milla for her wedding, because she had no idea what her daughter would like, the words had just slipped out. How could her mother suggest canceling the wedding, as if it was an appointment at the hairdresser's or dentist's? Why did her relationship with her mother, Sara, have to be so complicated? How she longed for a loving mother to be by her side during these weeks before her wedding. A mother she could tell everything, who was looking forward to the big day with her. But her mother appeared, as she had ever since Milla could remember, strangely detached, only absently listening to Milla's worries and never seeming to take a real interest in her life. At least, that's how it felt to Milla, and the sadness this brought was like a pain in her stomach. She thought back to her mother's reaction when, overjoyed, she had told her about the wedding plans. Sara had seemed slightly surprised, as though she couldn't believe anyone would want to marry her daughter. Then she'd smiled briefly and congratulated her somewhat stiffly. Wouldn't any normal mother have hugged her daughter at that moment? But not Sara. Milla remembered how rarely her mother had shown her any tenderness. She had occasionally, when she'd run to her crying with a grazed knee, but even then, it hadn't really felt comforting. Milla had been a sensitive child and had always felt that her mother didn't love her like other mothers loved their daughters. She'd wondered whether it was her fault and blamed herself, trying even harder to be a good girl and make her mother proud, but that didn't change anything either. So over the years, she had learned to stop the endless ruminations about what she might have done wrong, locking her feelings away in a corner of her mind. But the worry that something was not right with her remained. She had convinced herself that families weren't that important, and she could be happy with a handful of good friends. But now, with her wedding on the horizon, she missed having a family. During these last weeks of preparations for the big day, she was more and more aware that though she had very good friends, particularly her bestie, Tine, at the end of the day, she longed to have a loving family around her.